The untold story of witchcraft in America. This group, which secretly calls itself the Brotherhood, is made up of people who are directly controlled by and worship Satan. It is a rapidly growing and very dangerous cult. It has two major centers in the US, the West Coast, mostly in the Los Angeles-San Francisco area, and another in the Midwestern US where I lived. They are divided into local groups, or chapters, called covens. The covens range in size from 5 to 10 people to several thousand. This is the same cult written about in Hal Lindsey's book, Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth, and in Mike Warren's book, The Satan Seller. It is also the US counterpart of the group in England, written about in the book Freed from Witchcraft by Doreen Irvine. This cult is extremely secretive. No written records of membership are kept. Even the contracts with Satan signed in blood by the members are burned by the high priests and high priestesses. This is not common knowledge among the lower-ranking members. These Satanists infest every level of society, the poor and the rich, the very well-educated, the police force, government officials, businessmen and women, and even some so-called Christian ministers. Most all of them attend local Christian churches and are considered good citizens because of their involvement in local civic activities.
This is all done as a cover-up. They lead double lives and are expert at it, masters of deception.
And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness. 2 Corinthians 11 verse 14-15. They all go by code names at their meetings, so that, should they meet each other on the street, often as not, they would not know each other's real name. They are rigidly disciplined by Satan and his demons. They practice human sacrifice several times a year and animal sacrifice on a monthly basis. The human sacrifices are most often babies born out of wedlock to various cult members, cared for by the doctors and nurses within the cult so that the mother is never seen in a hospital. The baby's birth is never registered, neither its death. Other sacrifices are kidnapped victims, a cult member who is being disciplined, or who volunteers, I suspect because they can no longer live with themselves. Many of them are cold-blooded murderers, extremely skillful. Each coven is led by a high priest and a high priestess. These people get to their position by obtaining favor with Satan by various means and by obtaining greater and greater powers of witchcraft. There is much infighting within the group. There is an elite society of witches within the cult called the Sisters of Light. There are several occult groups in the US who call themselves the Illuminati. Most are not a part of the Brotherhood. There is a group called the Illuminati, made up mostly of people who are directly descended from the Druids of ancient England. They are extremely powerful and dangerous people, and are linked to the Brotherhood. They practice human sacrifice frequently. The Sisters of Light first came to the US from Europe in the late 1700s. They date back to the Dark Ages in Europe, but indeed have their roots back to the sorcerers of ancient Egypt and Babylon, who were powerful enough to be able to actually reproduce 3 of the 10 plagues sent upon Egypt during Moses' time. See Exodus chapter 7. These witches are incredibly powerful. They are able to produce disease and kill without ever physically touching the victim, even over a distance of thousands of miles. This is all accomplished by demons, of course, and these people are deluded into thinking that they control the demons, when actually Satan and the demons are just using them.
Incredible atrocities are committed within the cult, by humans so controlled by the demons within them, that they lose all emotions of love and compassion and become cruel beings that hardly seem human. Some of this will be discussed later in the book.
The rapidity of growth of the Brotherhood is a mark of the end times we are in, and a direct fulfillment of biblical prophecy. In the United States and around the world, there are countless thousands of cults and groups that worship and serve Satan under many, many different names. Many do not call Satan by this name, but by some other name. Many simply refer to him as the Master. Also, there are many independent groups of self-styled witches and Satanists. Customs and styles of worship in individual groups and organizations vary widely. I stepped directly into this cult when I went to that summer camp with Sandy. I was very excited by the time we arrived. With excitement, you lose a lot of what you see and hear. We were taken first to the dorms, where we were to stay, and made to feel very welcome. The camp had many facilities, museums, libraries, different houses where you could go to clairvoyants, hypnotists, palm readers, tarot card readers, voodoo experts, etc. Some of these people lived there the year round, some didn't. This was the place where the cult officially meets with the unknowing public. We attended many classes, which taught us how to extend and use our powers. Sandy took me to the first meeting with the Sisters of Light. Much later, I found out that they had been watching me carefully throughout my childhood, from the time of the sale of my blood made by Helen and Grace. Sandy took me into the large satanic church on the grounds about 2 hours before the main evening meeting. The sun was setting and the entire church was dark except for 13 candles in a circle on the floor at the front of the church, which cast eerie shadows about the 13 figures also seated on the floor, one behind each candle. As we drew closer, I could see that the figures were 13 women, all dressed identically in long white robes with attached cowl-like hoods up over their heads. They were each sitting cross-legged on the highly polished wooden floor, backs straight, arms folded across their breasts, staring with absolute concentration into the candle in front of them. The candles were each about 2 feet tall and 3 inches in diameter. They were made of black wax, and each one sat on top of a long, narrow sheet of paper that was covered with fine writing. The wax from the candles dripped down onto the papers. The women did not wear jewelry or ornamentation of any sort. There was no movement by any of them, except for their continuous, low-voiced chanting and humming as they offered their prayers to Satan. There was a power there that held me both fascinated and awestruck. I could feel a mighty stirring of the unexplainable power within myself as I sat and watched them throughout their 2-hour ceremony. I found myself drawn back again the following night to watch the same ceremony. I knew that they were the Sisters of Light only because Sandy told me so. Other cult members referred to them as mothers, and few knew that they were actually this elite group. They never told men of their identity, as men were strictly excluded from the group. However, they are the powerhouse and main strength of the cult, and a strictly guarded secret even within the cult itself. They do not tolerate weakness in any of their members. Anyone weak is destroyed. There are very few younger women among them. After the ceremony the second night, I was approached by one of the women. She told me that they had noticed my interest and already knew of my unusual power, and that they would very much like for me to enter into their training program. They were casual and kindly, and told me that they could train me to greatly increase and extend my power as no other group could.
I swallowed the bait hook, line and sinker. At first, they told me of the greatness I could have, of how could use the power within me to get what I needed. Also, whatever I wanted I could have. This power was of Satan, not of God. They were the first to tell me that, and they also told me that Satan is the only true God. They taught me how to chant and hum, told me that if I wanted anything, all I needed to do was to light my candle and put my prayers underneath it. Requests not only for myself, of course, because I must not be selfish. I could pray either for another person's uplifting or for his downfall. It made no difference, as long as there was someone else's name on the paper, as well as my own.
At last, the final day of the camp came, and I prepared to go home. Suddenly, I was faced with the fact that all the kindliness of the people at the camp was a front, and that my involvement was no longer a game, nor was it voluntary. When I met Sandy for the trip home, she told me that she had just had word from the Sisters of Light that they were offering special training to myself and some others who were specially gifted. Sandy said that they and the High Priest and High Priestess wanted to speak with me briefly over at the church before we left.
I went over to the church and entered with several others.
After we got into the church, we saw that armed guards immediately stepped in front of the doors, and we were told to stand before the small group at the front of the church. The High Priest then told us that we had been selected to join the Brotherhood, which meant signing a contract with Satan in our own blood at a meeting the following night. I asked what was in the contract and was told that I would be giving myself body and soul and spirit to our great father Satan in return for many blessings from him. We were also told that if we did not want to do so, that they would use certain persuasion to change our minds.
I told them that under no circumstances would I sign such a contract. At this point, the High Priestess took over and informed me that I had no choice. I looked her square in the eye and said, "Go to hell, you bitch! I think you are all weird. I will do no such thing."
Immediately, a very large guard, armed with a submachine gun, came up behind me and grabbed my arm at the wrist, pulling it behind me and upwards with such force that I felt as if he had broken it. He told me that I was to bow my knee to the High Priestess and ask her forgiveness for my disrespect, that if one did not do so, he would beat me until I did.
Outraged, I shouted, "Then go ahead and start, because I'm not bowing myself to any woman."
He swung at me, his fist catching me full force in the temple. I don't remember anymore until I awakened in small 5x5-foot cell. It was completely bare with a hard wooden floor. The door had a small window out to a hallway so that I could be observed. It was almost completely dark. I was in that room for 24 hours. It seemed like days. I was not allowed to sleep. Speakers blared constantly. I was told over and over again that all glory and honor and homage was due Satan, that I needed to ask Satan's forgiveness, that Satan was the God of the universe. I was also told that my family was being watched, and that if I did not adhere to the rules and regulations and sign the contract, that they would all be tortured and killed. I was not given any food or water during that time. The following evening, I was taken from the room by 2 guards into another room where I was met by 2 women from the Sisters of Light. They helped me to bathe, then placed a satiny white robe over my nude body. My feet were left bare. The robe reached the floor and was tied at the waist with a white cord. It had a cowl-like hood and long, loose sleeves. It did not have ornamentation of any kind. The women told me that I should not fight anymore, that I could not avoid my destiny. They told me what wonderful blessings I would receive by giving myself to my father Satan. I was transported to the meeting in a closed van so that I could not see where we were going. This meeting was not held at the Satanic Church on the camp grounds. I caught only a glimpse of the outside of the building as I was hurried inside. It had no windows and was back in a woods. It looked like it was some sort of storage building on a farm, though isolated, and there was some straw on the wooden floor inside. The building was dimly lit by many large flickering candles around the walls. The candles were in groups of 3, a black, red, and white candle in each group. There were 200 to 300 people present, seated on plain wooden benches facing the front of the room. At the front was a wooden platform with torches burning around the edge on about 5-foot-tall poles. There was a rough-hewn stone altar down in front, in the middle of the platform, which looked like it was sitting on sawhorses. I was to learn later that this was indeed the case, to provide easy movability. The stone was gray, with many brownish stains. These stains were from the blood of the many sacrifices performed on that altar, both animal and human. In spite of my exhaustion and fear, I felt a stirring of excitement as I felt the tremendous invisible power within that room, and a responding stirring of the power within me. Incense was burning, filling the room with its odor. I think it had some sort of drug in it because it quickly made me quite dizzy. The room was absolutely silent as the robed and hooded figures looked expectantly at the empty stage. At some unseen signal, many small handheld bells started ringing as the high priest and high priestess stepped noiselessly onto the stage out of the shadows. The high priest and high priestess wore identical robes. The robes were both of a black satin material, the same style as my own, trimmed with red around the hood, down the front edges, and around the edges of the long full sleeves. Each was tied at the waist with a golden cord. Their feet were also bare, as were everyone else's. Each carried a scepter about 3 feet long. The high priestess was gold. At the top was an inverted cross with a serpent curling around the handle and up onto the cross. The high priest's scepter was of the same design, but made of silver. The scepters were carried reverently in the crook of their arms. Their presence was commanding, and I became aware, really for the first time, of the tremendous power they had, and I envied them. There were many heavily armed guards at that meeting, both inside and outside of the building. This was my first attendance of a real cult meeting. All the rest had been games and play and show. After the opening remarks, I was taken forward to the front of the altar by the 2 guards. I and the others were introduced to the congregation as new members anxious to join. The high priest first centered his attention on me. He said,
Brothers and sisters of Satan, we bring you this child, this one called Sister Courage. That was my new name. We bring her to you, for she has asked to become one of us. And now unto our Lord and God our Master, the Master of the universe, and also the Destroyer, Satan, we say, this child, Sister Courage, we give unto you to do your bidding, to be what you want her to be. We have promised her, as you have given us the word to promise, your blessings. I was then given a knife to cut my finger with, but I refused to do so. Instantly one of the guards brought a whip down hard on my back, causing me to writhe in agony, but I was determined not to bow to them. With a flick of her hand, the high priestess signaled the guard to stop beating me. She spoke in a voice dripping with disdain and said that there were much more effective ways of showing me my error. I watched in amazement as she and the high priest took up positions on opposite sides of a large pentagram, 5-pointed star, drawn on the floor in the middle of the stage. The pentagram was drawn inside of a circle, and a black candle sat at each point of the star. With merely a wave of her hand, the high priestess lit all the candles at once without touching any of them. Then she started an incantation, the high priest joining in with the chant. The audience also chanted at certain points when directed to do so by the ringing of the little bells. Suddenly, the pentagram was engulfed in a whoosh of smoke and blinding light. The room was instantly filled with a foul odor as of burning sulfur. A huge demon appeared in a physical manifestation in the center of the circle, flames surrounding him. He was huge, about 8 feet tall. He glowered menacingly at me, weaving back and forth. The high priestess, Grace, turned to me and told me that if I did not obey and sign the contract that I would be given to that demon to torture until he finally killed me. That was enough for me. Never had I felt such fear. But at the same time, I lusted after the power displayed by Grace, the high priestess.
I was determined to become as powerful as she so that I could get revenge on those people for all that had been done to me. When I signaled my willingness to sign the contract, 2 women came forward and placed a black robe over my white one. The black robe was made of a cotton material and was of the same design as the white one. The black was a sign that I was no longer a novice.
I took the knife offered me and cut my finger deeply. Then I dipped a quill pen in my own blood and signed the contract with my name, stating that I was giving myself body, soul, and spirit to Satan. Immediately after signing the contract, I was engulfed in an electronic charge of energy which surged from the top of my head down to my toes. It was so strong that I was knocked to the floor.
As I lay on the floor, trying to recover, I realized that Grace was doing another incantation.
I struggled to my feet to find that she had called up another demon.
This one came down to where I stood and told me that he was going to live in me. He reached out and roughly grabbed me by the shoulders before I had time to say anything. Immediately, I felt agonizing, searing heat go through my body and smelled sulfur strongly again. In the midst of the agony, I passed out and knew nothing more until I was roughly loaded into the van for the return trip to the camp. By that time, I was so exhausted and dizzy from the lack of sleep, the beatings I had endured, and the lack of food and water, that I did not fully comprehend the significance of what was happening to me. I stayed at the camp for a week afterwards, so that the most noticeable of my cuts and bruises could heal. When I went home, I thought and felt that I was now one of the most powerful people on earth. I knew that I had power that was beyond most people's imagination. I thought that nothing and no one could destroy me.
How wrong I was!